My name is Chelsea Feldman, and I teach first and second grade at the Berkeley School, and I have been teaching for 11 years. And I originally got into the field of teaching via outdoor education. After college, I spent a couple of years working in outdoor schools and doing urban agriculture and taking kids into the wilderness and working with kids from all backgrounds, from all parts of the Bay Area, and got just really engaged with working with youth, specifically around sort of environmental justice, and that led me into the classroom. And I would say where I started in my work was this sort of sentimentalist approach to like really wanting to connect with my students, and feeling like we were all in it together and we're gonna do good work, and maybe not pushing kids as hard as I could, or creating structures that were gonna actually make it successful for kids, but coming from a place of like really a heartfelt desire to make the world a better place and connect with kids and their families.
And can you talk a little bit about your journey, like if you can remember your own experience in schools and then where you ended up, and how that changed your mindset over time?
Sure. So I grew up in a very rural, very homogeneous environment in the islands north of Seattle. And so on the one hand, I grew up in a public school because that's all there was, with the same group of, I think, like 110 kids from kindergarten through 12th grade. So what I was exposed to in that environment, in terms of curriculum and all the things, peers, it was all very homogeneous. And another lens for me in my growing up experience educationally was I had a lot of trauma in my family, with the death of a parent early on, and just sort of dysfunction in general in my family. And so for me, coming to education later on in life, it wasn't necessarily my goal at that time, but I definitely experienced, as a child, a lot of sort of being on the outside, because my family structure looked really differently, and because I was just in school kind of in that state of being very unsettled and having a lot of anxiety and stress about what was going on at home, and there was no support for me at school, and so there was a need for me to really protect what I was experiencing and what I was feeling. So I think that really informed my teaching practice from the beginning, going in and having had that experience of school not necessarily being a place where I felt safe with the grown-ups, was something that I definitely wanted to provide as a teacher. That felt foundational to my own understanding of what it meant to be in the classroom, is to be that kind of safe buffer for kids. I started in a public school, and there are a lot of differences in many ways between public and independent school. I have found that in independent schools, there is definitely more of a robust engagement with social emotional curriculum, so that layer of really meeting kids around their emotional life and giving them tools and strategies and support systems and structures for managing their emotions, and then even having people on staff outside of the classroom teachers who are available to add an extra layer of support, is a pretty huge difference. And I'd say that in my current position right now, that's just a really big part of the work we do day in and day out, is that social emotional coaching, and with the goal of making all kids have an opportunity to feel like they are being seen and held wherever they are with their emotional life each day.
So, what was the aha moment that you had that helped move you from a sentimentalist to a warm demander?
I think a lot of it has to do with your own personal healing journey and kind of realizing, like doing that heavy lifting of figuring out what you need to be a whole person and be your best self, both personally and professionally. And I think a lot of that was, just the process of growing up and gathering those skills and tools for self-care and setting boundaries and understanding, what it means to kind of walk that path of maintaining emotional equilibrium as how you want to be in the world, and being able to hold that space for others, and a lot of that, for me personally, in the professional realm, was around developing, just again, in the same way of the students, committing to developing practices that help you get grounded in that way, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's connecting with nature, all the things that you do to really show up as your best self with the students, so that when kids come to you, you have that bandwidth to actually be present with them. And I think that is, in my experience as a teacher, things are always moving 100 miles an hour, and you always have so many competing needs happening, that when you come to a place where a child is reaching out to you in need, or you're trying to problem solve, that ability to actually stay really grounded and present is huge, and it's something that has to be developed and really attended to, so that you can be checking yourself, like, am I present? How am I being with this person right now? Am I available for this interaction? So I think that was a long-winded way of saying, like, doing your own work on yourself so that you can show up and be available and your best self for your students.
And how has your own personal identity work led you to a warm demand of practice of dealing with students of color?
Yeah, that's a great question. So from the beginning of my educational journey, the master's program I went to definitely was focused on, working in diverse urban settings. And so my whole framework for going into the classroom was very much about supporting children and families, and kids of color. Not necessarily from that standpoint of looking at my own whiteness in relationship to the communities I was going to be working in. And once I had an experience, and so that was my framework for years, that I, really focused on, was making sure that I was, again, building rapport, reaching out to kids, reaching out to families. But I did have an experience professionally where I had a student I was working with who got involved in a conflict with a peer around race. And it didn't actually happen in my classroom. It happened outside of my classroom. But I was called in to sort of manage the situation and to connect with the families. And it was a moment when, truthfully, I didn't really have the skills to handle it properly. And I was in a kind of vulnerable professional situation, so I didn't reach out for help. And the way that the whole process unfolded just did not go well. And it was a real sort of eye-opener and like heart-bursting open experience of being called in by the parent of this child and being told, like, I feel like you have bias against my child, you're not handling this properly. And what was fascinating to me at the moment was, not only was I terrified to be hearing that I had created a situation that this family perceived was really not only helping but harming this child through the process, but I also found myself in that seat of white fragility, like, so intensely, and not, kind of coming to the table in tears and not being able to unravel what was happening for me in that moment enough to just say, hey, I'm really sorry about the impact of that, and to show up and clean up and try to fix that problem in the moment. And that was, for me, kind of the beginning of my own process around my own identity and being able to really commit to doing as much learning as I could about how I show up as a white teacher in the classroom. And after that, I went to the White Privilege Conference. I did SEED for a year. I participated in a white anti-racist educators group. And again, that's just another lens that I'm always considering in my work in the classroom. And for me, it was just really profound that I had, when your heart is in the place of wanting to help people, and then you find that because of a way you're being in relationship to a difficult conversation, and part of that is around just really not knowing and protecting that, trying to protect yourself in that knowing. That was a real eye-opener for me, that I never wanted that to happen again. And to then also hold a growth mindset, knowing that, we live in a very complex world and mistakes will happen, but for me, the real the learning came in knowing that when I needed help, I could ask for help and support in these situations that felt uncomfortable, and that, families are the experts, and there's never any reason for me to assume that I know how to fix a problem, and that especially when it comes to identity work, that first and always reach out to families, and they are our allies, and figure out what is it when somebody has been microaggressed, when somebody's in a situation where they feel unsafe, that taking care, even if I don't know the right way to proceed, that it's not my place to manage, it's my place to find out, how can I help? Let me talk to you. What do you need? What does your family need? And to just not take responsibility in that situation to be in control, but to be an ally.
And thinking about a student that you've had come in that is having the amygdala hijack, like they're not ready. How have you successfully seen yourself move a student to a ready for rigor mindset?
I mean, it's all about relationship, and observing kids in their the arc of their energy through the day, and sort of how they're presenting with teachers, how they're presenting with their work, how they're presenting with their peers, and just getting to know who they are in the space, so that there are points of kind of authentic contact that I can access. Because really, without that rapport and without the relationship, there's no leverage for me in terms of goal setting and coming from a place of establishing rigor. So that's always my go-to, is trying to, again, lay the foundation of trust, and not with just the kids, but with the families, so that from there I can really say, hey, I'm noticing, or again, come to the kids, how is this working for you? What do you need right now? What are some strategies that you think will be helping? So that, again, it's not me necessarily coming from the top down, but working in partnership to help establish ways of being in the classroom that will feel successful.
How do you find time to do that?
Well, I have a real luxury of having a teaching partner who in a small classroom, so that's, going to be different than many classrooms, but we really focus on checking in about kids, especially kids who we have some concern around, their social life at school or their academic access. And so we're in just this, a built-in part of our day and week is, even if it's on the fly, checking in about, hey, did you notice how that person walked into school this morning? Maybe something's going on with them. Have you checked in with them? So there's just this ongoing dialogue around, again, how kids are showing up and how we can support them, and whether that's through actually doing collecting data through assessments, or if it's just a kind of on-the-fly observation. It's just kind of woven into the fabric of our work together every day.